On a Tuesday last October, my mother walked into the office where I work in Erie, Pennsylvania, gave the receptionist her name, and looked straight through the woman standing 6 feet behind that counter with a stack of files in her arms. Her own daughter, 34 years old. She didn't recognize me, or she chose not to. And in the canvas bag on her shoulder, I already knew what she was carrying, because I'd been dreaming about it since I was 12. A green metal recipe box. When I was 12, my parents decided that the basics of my life were extras. When I was 14, they stopped buying my food. At 15, they left a card on my pillow telling me what my own bedroom would cost me every month. 20 years later, my mother came back with a bill for all of it. What she slid across that conference table on Friday afternoon had a number on the bottom, boxed and underlined twice. And what I slid back across that table is the reason my sister hasn't spoken to me in 10 months. Stay with me, because this doesn't end where you think it does. Let me start with that Tuesday, because that's where the ground opened up. The front desk called my extension a little after 2. "There's a Mrs. Vaughn here. She says she's family." I stood at the glass wall that separates our intake area from the waiting room, and I looked at her. 61 years old. Beige cardigan pressed. Purse squared on her knees like it had its own appointment. She was sitting in the same row of vinyl chairs where my clients sit, people 3 weeks from eviction, people with a shut-off notice folded in a pocket, people who have already been told no by 4 different windows. My mother sat in that row like the chair should have thanked her for the privilege. I hadn't heard her voice in 4 years, and that had been a wrong number she hung up on. I didn't go out. I want you to understand that I thought about it. I stood there long enough that Denise at the desk looked back at me twice. And then I did the only thing that felt survivable. I sent a message down. Friday, 4 o'clock. Conference room B. She could make an appointment. Like everyone else. Then I went back to my desk and looked at the calendar taped to the side of my monitor, where I'd been crossing off days in red marker like a kid counting down to summer. 21 days until closing on my first house. 11 years of saving. $41,000, every dollar of it earned in hours I can still feel in my shoulders. A little white clapboard place on Fairmount Parkway with a lilac bush by the porch steps and a garage that leans about 2 degrees off true. 1 signature away. And whatever my mother wanted, history told me it was going to come with a number attached. I had 5 days to decide what I owed the woman who once charged me rent for being her child. To answer that honestly, I have to take you back to a kitchen on Perry Street in the fall of 2003. My father, Bill Vaughn, was a pressman. 22 years at a commercial printing plant off East 12th, and he could set a job and true a machine and read a sheet coming off the press the way some men read weather. That plant closed in the spring of 2003. He took work at a plastics outfit out toward Harbor Creek for about 60% of what he'd made, and something in his shoulders went down and never came back up. My mother, Dolores, did billing for a dental group, and she ran our house the same way she ran that office. We were not poor. I need that on the record, because everything that comes next gets excused by people who assume we were broke. We were not. The truck payment never missed a month. There was a pot roast most Sundays. My mother got her hair done every 6 weeks at a place on Peach Street for $22 plus tip, and she never once skipped it. But that October, she sat me down at the kitchen table with a legal pad and taught me a new word. Extras. "You're 12 now," she said. "Extras are on you." Extras turned out to mean shampoo, notebook paper, the $3 for the school picture package, new laces. Anything that touched only my life got moved to a different column overnight, the way you'd move a line item on a spreadsheet. Quiet, clerical, permanent. I babysat for the Sokolowskis at the end of the block. $3 an hour. That became my entire economy at 12 years old. My sister Kendra was 17 then, 2 years from gone, and when I complained to her she just shrugged and said Mom had started charging her for her own gas that year. "It's not about you," she said. "It's a rule." Somehow that made it worse. A rule meant it was permanent. A rule meant somebody had written it down. And at the end of that first month, my mother handed me an index card by the stove. I still remember the weight of it. Nothing. It weighed nothing. October, 9.40. itemized. In her perfect upright handwriting, the same handwriting that filled out insurance forms all day. She watched me read it, and she looked pleased. The way a teacher looks when the slow kid finally gets it. The box lived on the counter between the bread box and the phone. Green metal, hinged lid, the kind your grandmother kept recipes in. Except there were no recipes in it. There were index cards, alphabetized, with our names on the tabs. Kendra, Rachel, and behind those, older ones, in a different color, that I wasn't allowed near. My mother wrote in that box the way other mothers write in baby books. Date, item, amount. She'd total a card with a mechanical pencil and tap it square on the counter, and I used to feel a cold go through me watching it. The same cold you feel watching somebody sharpen a knife and tell you it's just for the kitchen. Once she caught me looking and mistook my face for admiration. My father taught me this, she said, tapping the lid. I paid board at 16. Every Friday. 1979. She said it the way other people say they put themselves through college. Nobody handed me one thing. And look at me. I never fell. My grandfather, Emmett, died when I was 4. All I have of him is a smell of pipe smoke and a photograph on a boat at Presque Isle. But I knew, even then, that my mother stood differently when his name came up. Straighter. Like somebody had walked into the room. And here's the detail I chewed on for years, the one that kept me up. Those older cards at the back of the box weren't index cards at all. They were smaller. Yellowed soft, almost like cloth. And the handwriting on them, in the half-second I ever glimpsed it, was not my mother's. It was slanted. Harder. Pressed into the paper. Somebody had started that box before her. It would be 3 more years before I found out exactly whose hand that was. And by then, that box had a card in it with my entire childhood totaled at the bottom. 7th grade, the year I was 13, our class went to the Science Center in Pittsburgh. $26, lunch included. I asked at dinner. My mother didn't look up from her plate. That's an extra. So I sold candy bars out of my backpack for a month, 40 cents profit apiece, and I made that bus with $1 and change left over. And I told everybody on that bus that my parents were big believers in earning things. That's the second job nobody pays you for. Making it look like you chose it. That was also the year my sneakers went. The left sole peeled loose at the toe and flapped when I walked, so I glued it with rubber cement from the junk drawer. And when the glue quit, I glued it again. In gym that spring, that shoe slapped the floor on every single layup. Loud as a screen door in July. I laughed first. Always laugh first. That's a skill you develop, and you develop it young. One night my father watched me doctoring that sole at the kitchen table. He put down his coffee. He opened his mouth. He got as far as rake. Maybe we ought to. And then my mother came in from the back hall, and he studied the inside of his cup like there was a message down there for him. I want to be fair to the girl I was. She was not stupid. She could see other kids' parents just buying things. No cards, no totals, no ledger. She simply decided that the difference was a rule of her particular house. The way some houses take their shoes off at the door. You don't report a rule. You just learn it. Then came March of 2005. My 14th birthday. And the arithmetic changed. There was cake from a box with store-brand frosting, which I would only think about again years later when I saw it written down. $9. When the plates were cleared, my mother folded her hands on the table, and I knew that posture. That was her billing office voice, the one she used on the phone with people whose coverage had lapsed. You're 14 now, she said. Old enough for working papers. So here's how it's going to be. Food, clothes, school things. That's yours. All of it. We're done. I looked at my father. My father looked at the tablecloth. Kendra was 19 and living with her boyfriend in Mill Creek by then. Nobody was coming. Then my mother got up, opened the pantry, and showed me what she'd done that afternoon while I was at school. Masking tape labels. On the shelves. Bill and Dolores on the top 2. Kendra on the 3rd, half empty, waiting for her to come get the rest. And on the bottom shelf, bare, wiped clean, one strip of tape. Rachel. My shelf. My empty, waiting shelf. Nothing in this house is free, my mother said. And she said it gently, almost tenderly, like she was handing me the one heirloom our family had. Before bed, she set a single box of elbow macaroni on my shelf with a note taped to the top in her upright hand. Starter loan 89 cents. No interest. This once. I stood in that pantry doorway a long time that night. 14 years old as of that morning. Doing a kind of math no kid should be fluent in. The macaroni lasted 3 days. I still have the note. Pennsylvania lets a 14-year-old work, but it fences it in tight, and I learned those fences the way other kids learned song lyrics. Working papers through the school office. A parent signature, my mother signed with a flourish, delighted the Commonwealth agreed I was employable. During the school year. No more than 4 hours on a school day, 18 hours a week, nothing past 7 at night. So I built an entire life inside 18 hours. Saturday mornings, I worked the counter at Koval's Bakery on Parade Street, 6:15 a.m., boxing Paxki and Kolach and making change out of a cigar box. Weeknights, I sat for the Sokolowskis and the Duns, which the hour rules didn't much touch. Summers, the first ran a window at a soft-serve stand-out by Presk, all until my right wrist ached from the lever. Do the math with me, because I did it every night in bed. $32 from a Saturday. $25 from sitting. Call it $55 in a good week, less during the school year. Out of that came lunch. Deodorant. Jeans from the St. Vincent's thrift on 26th. Pens in September. A calculator for algebra that cost me 9 hours of my life. Peanut butter came in the biggest tub they made. Bread came from whatever was on the Denticon rack. Bananas came in whatever bag had the yellow markdown sticker on it. And Sylvia Koval, who was 60 then, for foot 11, with a stare that could strip paint off a radiator, paid me in cash out of that cigar box, and then every single Saturday she'd load a bag and set it by my coat. Day-olds, she called them. They were not day-olds. I watched her pull them out of the case at 11 in the morning. I priced all of it silently against my empty shelf at home, and I said thank you, and I walked it the 11 blocks back. One Saturday near the end of August, she watched me eat my lunch, folded bread out of a plastic bag, standing up, and she asked me, not unkindly, "Your people know you're eating lunch out of a bread bag." And I said something bright about how I just really loved bread. And I hated how smooth it came out of me. People ask me, always kindly, why I didn't just sign up for free lunch. I did. I want you to hear this part, because this is the part that most people have never thought about once in their lives. 9th grade, first week. I took the form off the cafeteria bulletin board myself. I walked it home. I put it in front of my parents at the table. Here's what nobody tells you about that form. It runs on household income. The parents' income. Both of mine worked. On paper, the Vaughns of Perry Street were fine. Comfortable, even. And my mother filled in every single box with her exact, honest numbers, because whatever else she was, that woman never once lied on a form in her life. The denial came back in about 2 weeks. We made too much money for me to eat. I remember standing at that mailbox on a gray afternoon understanding something enormous and having absolutely no word for it. Those programs are built for a house with no money in it. There is no box on that form for a house where the money is there and just doesn't reach the child. So I adapted, which is the polite word for what I did. I ate lunch every other day. On the off days, I had a rotation of stories. Big breakfast. Dentist after school. Coach has me watching what I eat. I did homework at the Blasco Library down on the bayfront until they blinked the lights, because that building was warm, it was free, and it asked me no questions. 3 qualities I have valued in buildings and in people ever since. I kept my grades up because grades were the one account where I was rich. And when I dropped 9 pounds between September and Thanksgiving, it was the school nurse, Mrs. Fanning, who stopped me in the hallway outside the gym and asked me flat out, "No warm-up, no cushion, Rachel. Is there food in your house?" And I looked that woman in the eye, 14 years old, and said, "Tons. My mom cooks huge." And she believed me. That fast. Walking away from her door, I understood 2 things at once. I had gotten frighteningly good at lying, and the lying was the only thing standing guard over the family that wasn't feeding me. Here's what a year of that does to a kid's head. I want you to understand the wound before I show you the scar. I stopped believing anybody was ever going to catch me, and then I turned that into a religion. Pay first. Owe no one. Every chair in the world has a meter running underneath it, so feed the meter before anyone has a chance to ask you for it. Sylvia tried to hand me a loaf once. Free. Just kindness on a Tuesday, no occasion. And I heard my own voice come out of my mouth and say, I'll work it off Saturday. She looked at me over her glasses for a long, long moment. And then she let me. But she wrote nothing down anywhere, and I remember being genuinely confused by that. A girl so fluent in ledgers that she could not read a gift. And my mother, meanwhile, tended the fear that kept the whole machine quiet. She never once said, don't tell. She said it sideways, over dishes, casual as talking about the weather. You know what happens to girls who go crying to teachers? Foster care. Strangers deciding your bedtime. And believe me, foster care doesn't have a shelf with your name on it either. I was 14. I checked what she said against nothing because I had nothing to check it against. She was the only expert on the world that I had. If you have ever kept a family secret to protect the very people it was hurting, you already know why I stayed quiet. And you know exactly what that backpack weighs. Now, the winter I turned 15 is when it stopped being a rule and became a business. That winter came in hard off the lake, the way it does in Erie, and my coat was 2 years and 4 inches too small. I wore it anyway through Thanksgiving, wrists out in the wind like a scarecrow. Then I gave up and hunted the thrift store on 26th until I found a gray wool coat. $7. Missing its belt. Heavy as a hug. My mother drove me there. Waited in the car with the engine running. And I was almost touched. That Sunday I came through the kitchen, and the box was open on the counter, and my card was sitting out, the ink still wet. Gas. Thrift store. 3.00. She had billed me for the ride to buy the coat I bought with my own money. I stood there in that coat and read that line twice. And something in me went very still and very clear, the way lake water goes clear when you finally stop stirring it. There was no bottom to this. Good behavior was never going to close this account. The account was not designed to close. That night I started a notebook of my own. A 50-cent memo pad from the drugstore. And I want to be exact about what was in it, because it's the only thing I've ever kept locked in a drawer. Not debts. Not grievances. Days. At the top of the first page I wrote March 9th, 2009, my 18th birthday. And under it I wrote the number of days left. 1100 and something. And every night before I turned off the lamp, I subtracted 1. I thought 18 was the finish line. It did not once occur to me, at 15, that my mother was looking at that same date on her own calendar and seeing an invoice coming due. 2 weeks later, I came home from sitting with the Dunn kids on a Friday night, and there was an index card propped against my pillow. Rent, 175.00. Do the first, or make other arrangements. I stood in my own bedroom holding it, and I could hear the television downstairs. A game show. Applause. At dinner the next night, my mother laid it out with the total serenity of a woman reading off a utility notice. I was 15. I used heat, water, lights. A room has a market value. Nothing in this house is free, Rachel. And this time, the blessing had a due date. I made myself ask the question slowly, so my voice wouldn't do anything. And if I can't? My mother set down her fork, walked to the hall closet, and opened it. On the floor, lit up, empty, was the avocado green hard-shell suitcase from the attic. The one that used to hold Christmas ornaments. Wiped down. Waiting. She had gotten the suitcase out before she ever told me the price of staying. Other arrangements, she said. And she sat back down and asked my father how the pork chops were. My father said the pork chops were good. I want the record to show that I tried to pay it. Because a 15-year-old's first instinct is not justice. It's staying. Sunday night, I came downstairs with a proposal I'd written out like a grown-up on a piece of loose leaf. 100 a month, plus all the laundry, all the dishes, the leaves in the fall, the walk shoveled all winter, and Erie winters are not a small offer, and we'd renegotiate in June when the ice cream stand opened back up. My mother read it twice. And for 1 second, I swear to you, something in her face was almost proud. Then she folded it in half. $175. Rent isn't a negotiation. That's the lesson. So I liquidated. I sold my flute for $60 to a girl a grade below me. For years of band. I'd paid it off myself at $15 a month from the music store on West 8th, and I sold it in the parking lot at school for $60 cash and told the band director I'd hurt my wrist. I asked Sylvia for more hours. She turned me down flat, and I have never forgotten why. State says 18 hours, Zieko. I'm not losing you to a labor inspector. Do you hear that? The one adult in my life who was paying me fairly was fenced in by the very laws that were supposed to be protecting me from the people who weren't. On the 1st of December, I put $175 in an envelope, the flute money, the tip jar money, everything in my sock drawer. And I set it on the kitchen counter next to the box. Because if this was rent, then she could collect it like a landlord. I ate macaroni and margarine for 3 weeks. My mother logged it. Received December 1st on time. And in late December, sitting in that library on the bayfront with my memo pad, I ran January's numbers, and there was no version of them that worked. There are only 2 ways out of a math problem with no answer. You cheat, or you show somebody the problem. And then, 4 days after Christmas, my parents drove to Meadville for a funeral. And I was alone in that house with the green box for 2.5 hours. I opened it. My card. Cards, plural. There were 5 of them behind my tab, and they went back to 2003. School pictures, 12.00. Cough syrup, 6.75. Birthday cake, 9.00. My own birthday cake. Further back, in the earliest hand, a doll from the Christmas I was 8. Billed retroactively the year the rule started. Reaching back into my life the way a new tax law reaches back into a year you already lived. Rubber cement, 2.19. I knew exactly which tube. And the running total on the bottom of the last card said $2,140.80. My childhood had a subtotal. But that's not the part that changed me. Behind the tabs, all the way at the back, were those older slips. Yellowed. Soft as cloth. And now I could read them. Dolores, board 6.00/WK, ode to Evie. 1979. Week by week, all the way through. And beside a good third of them, circled hard in pencil, one word. Late. My mother had kept her own father's invoices for 26 years. Carried them from apartment to house. And built her entire system around them. I sat down on the kitchen floor with those cards in my hand, and I felt the strangest thing I'd felt in 3 years, and it took me a minute to name it. That box was the most honest thing my mother had ever shown me. It said, "This has no end." And it said, "This did not start with you." Then I heard tires on the driveway, and I put everything back 1 finger width off its usual angle, and for a week I waited for the sky to fall. It never did. She couldn't conceive of anyone touching it. But 11 days later, something did fall. Me. The second Saturday in January, I walked to the bakery on a cup of instant coffee and half a bagel, and around 10 in the morning the tray in my hands started to swim. I remember standing there holding a sheet of collac and being genuinely unsure whether I was standing up straight. And then Sylvia's hand was on my elbow, and my whole weight, all of it, was leaning on a 60-year-old woman who came up to my chin. She didn't ask me one question. She flipped the sign, locked the front, walked me through the back and up the stairs to her kitchen, and she fried eggs and kielbasa and potatoes and set the plate in front of me and stood at the stove with her back turned out of mercy. I understand now. While I ate like something out of a ditch. Only when the plate was clean did she sit down across from me with her coffee. Rent, she said. At 15. I had never told her. She had assembled it herself. The flute. The bread bag. The hours question. That woman could count. Say it out loud, girl. It doesn't get any righter the quieter you keep it. So I said it out loud. And she was right. It sounded insane in open air. $175 a month. The suitcase in the closet with the lid up. And I heard my own voice come apart on the word arrangements. Sylvia didn't hug me. not her instrument. She topped off my milk like she was filling a truck, and she told me there were people whose entire job was math like mine. She said the nurse at my school wasn't there for decoration. Monday came, and I stood outside Mrs. Fanning's office with my hand up to knock twice, and I walked away twice, because my mother's voice, foster care, strangers, no shelf anywhere, was still the loudest thing in my skull. The third time, I never got to knock. The problem walked itself in. It was a Wednesday. Mrs. Fanning had called me down about a vaccination form. Completely ordinary. And while I was digging in my backpack for a pen, it tipped over on her floor, and the January card slid out onto the linoleum, face up. Rent, $175.00. Due the 1st. And under it, new that month in the upright hand. Late fee, $20.00. She picked it up to hand it back to me, and she read it, because it was printed as neat as a shipping label, and it was impossible not to. And then she got up and closed her door. She asked me 3 questions. Spaced way out. Quiet. In the voice you'd use around a bird you didn't want to startle. Who writes these? How long has this been going on? What have you eaten today? And 2.5 years of load-bearing silence came down all at once. I told her everything at about 100 miles an hour. The shelf with my name on the tape. The denial letter. The suitcase. And then I grabbed her sleeve and I begged her, actually begged, I am not dressing this up. Not to tell anybody. She put her hand over mine and she told me the truth instead of a comfort, and I have loved her for it for 20 years. She said she was what the law calls a mandatory reporter. That now that she knew, she was required to call. Not choosing to. Required. Her license and her conscience, both on the line. And then she told me the thing my mother had spent 3 years making sure I'd never hear. That their first job is keeping kids safe in their own homes whenever that can be done. That nobody was going to pull me out of my school over empty cupboards. The point is to fill the cupboards. Then she leaned forward and said the sentence I have carried ever since. Look at me. You are not the one failing here. If you were ever that kid, the capable one, the fine one, the one nobody thought to ask, I want you to sit with that sentence for a second. It was not written for me. It was written for whoever needed it. She picked up the phone while I was still in the chair. And what the county did next is the part nobody ever expects. They moved faster than my nightmares did. Intake took the report on Wednesday. By Friday afternoon, a caseworker named Rita Bergstrom had a home visit scheduled, which meant my mother had 48 hours notice and a lifetime of practice looking correct. You have never in your life seen a set dressed so fast. Friday morning, she went to the grocery store before work. I know exactly what she spent because it went onto my card that same night, and I need you to sit with this entry the way I had to. Groceries for inspection, $71.00. She billed me for the food she bought to prove that she fed me. By 4 o'clock, the masking tape was off the pantry shelves, balled up in the trash like shed skin. The index card was gone from my room, and so was the little square of tape residue on my headboard, scrubbed off with a rag. And there were clementines in a bowl on the counter. We had never in my entire life had a bowl of fruit on that counter. Mrs. Bergstrom came at 4:30. Mid-30s, unhurried, canvas bag of forms. My mother served coffee and gave the performance of her career. We believe in teaching responsibility. Girls this age dramatize. You know how they are. She gave that woman a tour of the house like a realtor. My father sat on the edge of the couch in his work shirt with his hands flat on his knees, a man being inspected, and said yes, and that's right in his assigned slots. Mrs. Bergstrom nodded at everything, complimented the kitchen, wrote almost nothing down. I stood by the stairs cataloging every way this was going wrong, doing my old job. The fine girl, the nothing to see here girl. And then at the door, bag already on her shoulder, she turned around like she'd forgotten her keys. One more thing. I'll want to see Rachel at school this week. Alone. Standard procedure. I watched my mother's smile hold its position 1 full second too long. They gave us a conference room by the attendance office, and that woman asked her questions the way surveyors drive stakes. Small. Unremarkable. Load-bearing. And you don't see the shape of the property until later. When did the food stop? Who signed the working papers? Because the school keeps those on file, with the employers and the hours. Could she see the denial letter from the lunch program? There'd be a copy in the system. What did I weigh in September? The nurse has that. What time does the bakery open on Saturdays? Mrs. Koval wouldn't mind a phone call, would she? And here is the thing I had never understood. The thing I had been protecting the wrong way for 3 years. She did not need my mother's box. And she did not need me to perform my hunger for her. My life was already a file. The working papers. The pay records. The denial letter. The scale in the nurse's office. The hours at the bakery. The state had been quietly taking attendance on me the entire time. And every lie I ever told had only ever protected the gap between those records. I answered everything. I even told her about the clementines. She wrote that down slower than anything else. At the end, she capped her pen and gave it to me straight, because she'd clocked me as a kid who trusted procedure more than promises. Based on what she had, the finding would likely be substantiated. Neglect. The basic needs kind. What came next, if my parents cooperated, was a plan in the home. Food, clothes, school costs, no rent, no fees, and the agency checking in. And if they didn't cooperate, it went in front of a judge. That night my mother didn't yell. She sat under the kitchen light with the green box open, and she started a brand new card. I'd find out soon enough what it was for. The meeting happened the second week of February in a beige room with a long table, and it remains the only time in my life I have watched my mother sign something as though the pen were being held to her back. The terms were almost embarrassingly small, which is its own indictment. Food in the home appropriate to a growing adolescent. Clothing seasonally adequate. School expenses covered. No rent. No fees. No charges to the minor child. I remember the caseworker reading that last line completely evenly, no italics in her voice at all, and the room getting very quiet anyway. My mother signed every page in that perfect hand. My father signed underneath like an echo. And when it was my turn to sign the youth acknowledgement, I heard Mrs. Fanning in my head, "You are not the one failing here." And my signature came out steadier than either of theirs. Afterward, in the hallway, Mrs. Fanning was waiting with one more door. There was a legal aid clinic downtown that ran a walk-in night on Thursdays, and she'd already made me an appointment, and I went. And a young attorney with a coffee stain on his tie spent 40 minutes explaining me to myself. What I walked out of that room holding was a blue folder. Inside was a plain English summary of a parent's duty of support in Pennsylvania. Food, shelter, clothing until 18. Not negotiable. Not billable. There was a line that said a parent cannot charge enforceable rent to their own minor child. There was a line that said locking a minor out of the home is abandonment. And under it, a phone number. Names of real people who answer. Nobody in my life had ever put in writing that I had rights. I read that folder under the covers with a flashlight. Twice. Like contraband. It took 11 more years for the girl holding that folder to become the woman who hands them out. And I have never opened a fresh box of blue folders at my desk without thinking about it. Meanwhile, downstairs, that new card got its heading. I saw it one afternoon, printed neat as a headstone. County interference costs. My mother had opened an account for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. What followed was not peace. It was compliance, which is peace with the warmth boiled off. The shelves stayed full and the tape never came back. But every grocery trip was performed at me. Receipts smoothed flat on the counter like subpoenas. New jeans appeared on my bed in the store bag with the receipt stapled to it twice, in case I missed the sacrifice. My mother spoke to me in the third person for most of that spring. Tell your daughter dinner's at 6. And I ate the dinners because winning that particular staring contest was a luxury item, and I was on a budget. But I owe you one night that complicates her, because it happened, and leaving it out would make this story easier and false. February, 2 a.m. I came down for water and the kitchen light was on. My mother was at the table in her robe with those yellowed slips in front of her. Her father's hand. The circled late. She didn't startle. I've wondered ever since if she wanted a witness. $6 a week, she said, to the paper more than to me. 1979. The February I came up short, he put the chain on the door. She waited a beat. I stayed at the bus station on 14th Street. 2 nights. Then she almost smiled. And what she said next, she said with the pride of a war story, and that is the part that still takes the wind out of me. It made me. Nobody owed me a thing, and I never fell. I stood there with my glass of water, 15 years old, and I saw the thing she could not see at 42 and still cannot see today. A girl on a plastic bench in a bus station in February in Erie, Pennsylvania, watching the door for a father who was not coming. She had not never fallen. She had simply never been caught. And she had spent her entire life since insisting that the floor was a teacher. In the morning she was granted again, and the receipts kept coming. But I made myself a promise at that table, watching her fold her father's invoice back into that box like a pressed flower. It took me 20 more years to keep it. The next 2 years, I'll give you the way the county file probably gives them. Stable. Monitored. Unremarkable. All the drama went underground. The visits went monthly, then quarterly. My mother performed adequacy on schedule and logged the cost of every bit of it, a bill she fully intended to present at a window she believed would open someday. My father developed a genius for the small end run. The spring I was 16, a flute case turned up on my bed. Not mine. Same brand, older, a dent in the bell. When I asked, he said a guy at work had a daughter who quit band. That was the entire conversation. I found the pawn shop tag inside the lining that August. He'd bought me a flute, and he needed it never to be discussed, and so we never discussed it, and that was our love language. Objects and silence. There was a folded 10 in my coat pocket in December. There was a thermos of soup in my locker the week of finals, and I know he made it because my mother has never made soup in her life. I've had 20 years to think about my father, and here's where I landed. My dad was not cruel. My dad was a tenant too. The longest standing tenant she ever had. Paid up monthly in silence and small permissions. $10 bought a week of lunches. It did not buy a word at the dinner table. It did not buy a signature on a lunch form. It did not buy a hand laid flat on that green box. And I want to tell you something true. Love like that is a species of hunger. It keeps you circling the porch light, absolutely sure that this time the door is going to open. Me, I ran my exit like a small business. That legal aid attorney had told me one more thing that stuck. Open a bank account in your own name. So I did, and I fed it every Saturday like a meter, and I watched it go from 3 figures to 4. Grades stayed weaponized. I made honors every semester. My only real extravagance was the $11 I paid, my money, my line, in my own memo pad for transcript fees on 5 scholarship applications. Sylvia wrote the recommendation letter for all 5. She showed me the draft exactly once, and I had to go into the back and break down flour bags where she couldn't see my face, because the first sentence was, "I have watched this child feed herself for 4 years, and I would trust her with my shop, my register, and my name." Sunday afternoons that last year, she taught me to put up peaches. Jars lined up on her windowsill like amber lamps. And she always handed me 2. One to sell and one to eat, Zieko. Learn the difference. I was still learning it. Then March came. I turned 18. And in June, my mother finally gave me the graduation present she had been writing since I was 12. Graduation was a Friday. I walked with honor cords and a plan instead of a party. Community college in the fall, paid by scholarship and by me. Sylvia sat 9 rows up and put 2 fingers in her mouth and whistled loud enough that a man in front of her turned around. Dinner was at home. Cake from a box, store-brand frosting. The same brand as my 14th birthday, and to this day I do not know whether that was thrift or theater. When the plates were cleared, my mother went to the counter and came back with the green box and set it beside the cake plate. And she turned it to face me, open, to a card with my name on the tab and a total at the bottom in red pen. $11,260. Food since the case plan. Clothes since the case plan. Her gas. Her hours. The county interference card. The $71 of inspection groceries. All of it rolled together with the subtotals of my entire childhood. You're 18 now, she said, and her voice was almost warm, and that is what made it obscene. The county's out of it. We'll take it monthly. Nothing in this house is free, Rachel. My father's chair creaked. He said her name once. Dolores. And there was no engine behind it at all. I looked at that number for a while, and I felt very calm. I have since learned to distrust that calm in my clients, because it is the sound of a decision that has already been made. I went upstairs. I packed the avocado green suitcase. Hers. The one from the closet. I came down. I set my house key on the open box, squarely on the red total, right where a payment would go. Consider the account settled. And I walked out the front door and 2.5 miles through a June evening to Sylvia's, and she met me on the back steps, looked at that suitcase, and said, "Room over the shop. Rent is you water my tomatoes." My father watched me go from the front window. He didn't call out. 3 weeks later, the first envelope arrived. Forwarded. In the upright hand. Statement past due. Here's 16 years fast, because you've earned the present tense. Community college at night, receptionist work by day, an associate's degree, then a certification in housing counseling. Then, and I do think somebody upstairs has a sense of humor, a posting at a family financial and housing center on the west side of Erie, 3 blocks from the clinic that once gave a 15-year-old a blue folder. I've been there 8 years. Eviction defense referrals, utility assistance, budget counseling, benefits intake. I am the person who prints the folders now. The past due statements came twice a year at first, regular as the equinox. Then annually. Then hardly. I never answered one. I also never threw one away. And if you want to know how healed I really was, there it is. A shoebox on my closet shelf. 16 years of my mother's arithmetic kept. Some accounts you close. Some you just stop feeding and keep in a box. I told myself that box was closure. That box was not closure. That box was me still holding the door open for her version of things. Kendra called every Christmas from Charlotte, and we discussed weather systems with real commitment. She'd send photos of her boys in matching pajamas. She signed cards from all of us. Sylvia got older. I put her storm windows in every October. She turned 76 last spring, and she is still out there ruining a tomato hornworm's entire career. And I saved 11 years, $41,000. No cosigner, because asking anybody for help still felt like debt with the paint scraped off it. You can leave a house and keep living by its rules for the rest of your life, and nobody warns you about that. By last October, I had a pre-approval letter, a white clapboard house on Fairmount Parkway under contract, and a closing date circled in red. And then, on a Tuesday, 21 days out, my mother walked into my waiting room with that green box in her bag. It took my sister's phone call that same night for me to learn why. Kendra called at 9:15, which by itself told me it was serious, because Kendra calls at Christmas. No weather this time. Dad had had a stroke in July. A small one, they said, which is a phrase that means nothing. He was home, he was walking, his right hand didn't do what he told it anymore. No work since. The short-term disability ran out in September. Mom's hours at the dental office had been cut to part-time 3 years ago, and she never told anybody. They were 2 months behind on the apartment out on Steratania Road, and the landlord had already posted the notice. And then came the reason for the call, delivered the way Kendra delivers everything. Casserole on top, ultimatum underneath. She was stretched thin. The boys, the mortgage, Charlotte prices. But I was doing fine, wasn't I? Single. No kids. And come on, Rachel, you literally work at a place that helps people with this exact thing. You of all people should understand. Family helps family. The ask had 2 doors. Door 1, I co-sign a new lease. Door 2, they move in with me. I told her I'd call her back by the weekend. Then I sat down at my kitchen table and did what I do, which is math on paper, because paper doesn't panic. A co-signed lease is contingent debt. Contingent debt 3 weeks before closing means underwriting reopens my file. And a reopened file on a first-time buyer with a margin as thin as mine is a coin flip I could lose. The house or the lease. It was never really both. And now the honest part. The part I'd never say out loud at the office. Lying in bed that night, I caught myself building the payment plan anyway. If I skipped this, if I deferred that, maybe I could carry them and still. And I sat up and turned on the lamp, a little sick to my stomach. 20 years out of that house, and my hands still knew the work. Paying was the one language my mother ever taught me fluently. And some tired midnight part of me still wanted to speak it to her just one time and be told that I was good. That's the version of me that had 4 days to get ready for conference room B. Thursday night, my kitchen table looked like a hearing docket. On the left, my closing packet. The pre-approval. The saving statements. 11 years of Saturdays in a font. On the right, my laptop and a stack still warm from the office printer. Because here is what I had actually been doing all week while the midnight version of me drafted surrenders. The county's emergency rental assistance application. Their names, their address, their landlord's information, filled into the signature line. The hospital system's financial hardship application for stroke and cardiac patients, filled out, with the direct line for a billing advocate I've worked with for 6 years circled twice. An area agency on aging intake, Dad qualifies now, which is its own strange sentence, with an appointment already scheduled. Tuesday, 10 a.m. A real caseworker with a real name. Lie-heap for the heating gap, because it was October in Erie and that clock runs fast. And a plain English sheet on how a payment plan stops an eviction if the landlord accepts county funds, which this landlord, and I checked the docket, has accepted before. It was the exact same play the county ran for a 15-year-old on Perry Street in 2006. Not a check. A scaffold. Process with dignity. Which is the only currency I have ever seen actually break a person's fall. Then I did one more thing. The only impulsive act of that entire week. I took down the shoebox of past due statements, and from underneath it I slid out the old blue folder. Corners gone soft as flannel. And out of the folder, the first page. Plain type. Rights of the minor child. The page I read under a blanket with a flashlight at 15. I put it on top of the stack. And I could not have told you that night whether it was for them or for me. Then I called Sylvia. I didn't ask for advice. I asked for a dinner. Sunday, she said. Come hungry. Bring nothing. And I sat with my hand over my eyes for a minute after we hung up, because after 20 years, bring nothing is still the sentence that gets me. They were early. Through the conference room glass, I watched them settle. My mother in the pressed cardigan, spine like rebar. My father, gray around the mouth in a way that made my chest hurt, lowering himself into the chair carefully, like a man carrying something breakable. Which I suppose he was. Kendra attended as a phone. Face up on the table. Speaker on. I brought 2 waters and my folder, and I sat down, and for a moment nobody said anything, and the copier droned through the wall like a tide coming in. My mother went first, of course. She set the green box on the table, and she opened it and turned it toward me, deliberately, the way you'd hand down a verdict. The card on top was headed 18 years. And it was beautiful, if you can stand back far enough to see it as a piece of work. Room. Board. Doctor. School. Until the county interfered, a phrase she had actually written down and actually meant. And the number at the bottom, boxed, underlined twice. $67,400. The $11,000 at my graduation dinner had been an invoice. This was a valuation. My entire childhood appraised like an estate. We're not unreasonable, my mother said. The rent situation is what's urgent. What's owed can wait. And then she did the thing I had not planned for. She lowered her voice. And for the first time in 34 years, my mother spoke to me like a supplicant instead of a creditor. Pay it and it's finished, Rachel. All of it. Clean slate. You come to Thanksgiving. You're our daughter again. My father's hand came halfway across the table. An old man's hand now, the right one, the one that doesn't fully cooperate. And it stopped short of mine. She means it, Rake. Nobody had called me that in 16 years. And from the phone, my sister's voice, gentle and terrible. This is fixable. Families fix things. And here's the truth, because you've come this far with me and you get the truth. For about 4 seconds, I wanted it so badly my teeth ached. Thanksgiving. A chair with my name on it instead of a shelf with my name on it. The whole warm package right there on the table. Retail, $67,400. Or one signature. Financing available. So I looked at the box instead. And the box, faithful as ever, told me the part the offer left out. Everybody at that table was waiting. And for once in my entire life, I knew exactly what I could afford. I didn't push the box back. I picked up my own folder. Blue. Because we still buy blue, and some traditions deserve to survive. And I set it down on top of the open box, covering the number, and I kept my hand flat on it while I talked. Quietly. The way Rita Bergstrom once drove her survey stakes. Here's what I can give you. The rental assistance application, complete to the signature line, for a landlord who has taken county money before I checked. The hospital hardship program, complete, with the billing advocate's direct line. Senior services intake, Tuesday at 10 in the morning, and the caseworker's actual name, because names matter when you're scared. Heating assistance for the gap months. And the eviction timeline in plain English. What stops it and by which date. Signatures and one bus ride. That's what it costs. It's real. It works. And it's what I have. I said, process. Not ransom. It saved my life once. If you let it, it'll hold yours. My mother looked at that folder the way you'd look at foreign currency. That's paperwork, she said. We're your parents. You have savings, Kendra said. And there it was. And it was almost a relief. The meter running underneath the offer of a family dinner. I took my hand off the folder and sat back. If I pay that card, there'll be another card. There's always another card. That's how the box works. It's how it worked when Grandpa Emmett kept it. Her chin came up like I'd slapped the table. You taught me nothing in this house is free, I said. I believed you. That's why I stopped living in your house. I'm not buying a seat at Thanksgiving, Mom. I'm closing the account. The room went very still. Even the copier, it seemed like. And my mother. My granite, upright, never once loud mother lost her voice's footing for the first time in my memory. After everything we... And that sentence just stood there in front of all of us, unfinished, because there was no honest way to finish it. Watching her hear that herself is the closest thing to an earthquake I ever expect to see in a conference room. She snatched the box back and swept my folder off to the side. And my father caught it. Squared the pages, and drew it over to his side of the table with both hands. A whole marriage renegotiated in one gesture. And she watched it happen. From the phone, my sister, disgusted. You're really doing this. You're heartless. You know that? I reached over and tapped the speaker off. No slam. Just a click. The quietest door I have ever closed. Then I slid one last page out from under the folder's flap and laid it in front of my father. Old paper. Plain type. Corners soft as flannel. Rights of the minor child. Keep that page. Somebody handed it to a 15-year-old once. A girl who thought she owed rent for being born. It's the only thing in that folder that isn't a form. My mother stood, straightened her cardigan, and walked out of the office where I work. My father sat 1 second longer. And then he folded that blue folder into the inside of his jacket against his chest. The exact same way a man hides a $10 bill. The invoice for that Friday came over the weekend, and I want you to see the price tag, because catharsis without a receipt is a fairy tale, and you deserve better than that from me. Saturday morning, a voicemail from Kendra. 90 seconds. Very calm, which is how my sister does fury. I had embarrassed her. I had abandoned 2 sick old people over childhood bookkeeping. Don't call me when they're gone. Her actual words. And she meant them. And as of this telling, that phone has stayed quiet through a Thanksgiving, a Christmas, and my father's birthday. Then a text from my Aunt Charlene in Girard, my mother's version already fully installed. Shameful. After everything they sacrificed. I read it once, standing at the counter. And I did not compose the correcting essay. Version control of the Vaughn family record is a job I resigned from that Friday afternoon. Grief and freedom, it turns out, can fit inside the same hour of the same Sunday. Then I drove out to Sylvia's and ate pot roast and brought nothing, as instructed, and sat on my hands through the entire meal fighting the reflex to earn it. And she watched me do it with that paint-stripping stare, and finally she said, "Look at that. Girl finally learned how to eat a free meal. Only took her 20 years. I laughed until I needed the napkin for something other than my mouth. About 2 weeks later, on a Wednesday, my father called me. Himself. His number, his voice, no intermediary, for the first time in my adult life. The rental assistance had gone through. Most of it, anyway. The landlord took the county money and a payment plan. The Tuesday caseworker was, in his words, good people. She brings folders like you. And then a silence with weight in it. And my father cleared his throat and paid a debt of his own. 7th grade. Those sneakers. The one that came apart. I saw it, Rake. I bought a lottery ticket that Friday instead of shoes, because shoes would have started a fight. I've owed you that sentence for a long time. He didn't ask me for money, or absolution, or Thanksgiving. He just set the thing down after 20 years of carrying it. And 9 days after that call, on a gray morning with the lilac bear out front, I closed on my house. The first night on Fairmount Parkway, I did exactly one piece of decorating. I loaded the pantry. Every shelf. Corn, green beans, tomatoes, Sylvia's peaches in their amber jars, the biggest tub of peanut butter they make, because some habits are load-bearing, and I have stopped apologizing for them. And I put labels on nothing. I stood in that doorway a long time. 12-year-old me looked at those shelves through my eyes, and I'm not going to perform for you what that felt like. Some rooms you just stand in. The housewarming was 6 people. Sylvia brought tomatoes and cased the place like a building inspector and told me the back step was going to kill somebody. And a card came in the mail from Deirdre Fanning, retired now, living down near Cranberry, because I had written to her last spring and school nurses answer their mail. Inside, under the printed part, one line in her steady hand. You were never the one failing. I put it on the refrigerator, eye level, where a green box used to sit on a counter in another kitchen. My mother's version of that Friday is out there working the family circuit. And it's a good product. Ungrateful daughter. Sick father. Heartless girl with a savings account. Some cousins bought it. The force that built her never went out of business. I just closed my branch. She still has the box. I assume it's open on some counter right now with a card in it that has my name on the tab. Accruing. That used to be the thing I could not stand. The account running with nobody at the window. It doesn't run in my house. That's the whole revenge, if you insist on the word. Her interest compounds in a box that nobody reads, and my pantry has no names in it. And at work, a Thursday last month, intake sent me a 15-year-old. Honor roll. 2 jobs. Polite as a bank teller. Feeding herself since March. Parents doing just fine on paper. I know that disguise. I invented half of it. I slid the blue folder across the table and watched her grip the edge of it with both hands. And I gave her the sentence exactly the way it was given to me, word for word, like something handed down that isn't a debt. Look at me. You are not the one failing here. So here is where the ledger of my family stands, since I'm the one telling it. Kendra, silence. Her choice. And I've stopped billing her for it in my head, which is the part of this practice that took real work. Dad and I run a small, sturdy trade route. I mail a postcard on the 1st of every month. The lilac in bloom. The county fair. The lake in January. Nothing that demands an answer. He texts back like a pressman. Got it. Tree looks good. Take care. Short and true. Cut to 1,000th. It's not a reunion. It's a root. And roots can be trusted. My mother, I hear, tells people she has 1 daughter. There's a chair at my table anyway. And I don't say that warmly. I say it the way you'd note a property line. The day Dolores Vaughn comes to my door without that box in her bag or in her sentences, there is a chair and there's pot roast, and there is no invoice waiting under the plate. I don't expect her. And I don't wait by that door anymore either. The porch light's just on because it's my porch, and I pay the electric bill gladly. It's the only bill in this whole story I have ever been glad to pay. If somebody has handed you a bill for loving you, hear me on this one thing. You are allowed to close the account. Walking away from a debt you never owed is not abandoning your family. It is refusing to abandon yourself. And no ledger on this earth outweighs a pantry full of food with no names taped to the shelves. That's my story. A green box, a blue folder, and a shelf with nothing written on it. If this reminded you of a kid in your life who seems just a little too self-sufficient, ask one more question. The capable ones are the best hiders. I know. I was one. And if somebody you love needs permission to close an account they never opened, send them this.